Hi, everyone. Today we are going to be talking about chapters 4 and 5, thinking about how to start to come up with a research topic and how that will lead into your research purpose and questions, talking about how to begin conducting a literature review, and then how those will lead into a research proposal. So these chapters are going to be really important to come back to throughout the semester because we know that our big assignment is to write a research proposal. So coming back to chapters 4 and 5 towards the end will probably be very helpful, but this will lay the foundation of where we're going and give your brain a place to collect all of the information we cover in later chapters. So starting off with the sources of research ideas, where do researchers get the ideas that turn into their empirical studies? And one of them is their everyday life. So this could be your personal life or your professional life. Issues or topics or things that come up are oftentimes the source of a research. Also, practical issues, they may be things that you are seeing in the media. It might be things that you are noticing in your neighborhood or community, something that you want to take up in your research. Another one is past research. Oftentimes at the end of research and a conclusion, the authors will give a list of questions for future research or topics for future research, or gaps in the literature as we refer to it as. And then another one being theory. So thinking about some of those broad theories that came out of either applied research or more so non-empirical studies that are theorizing concepts, taking that and applying it to situations. For instance, in education, it might be taking constructivist pedagogy, the theory behind that, and applying it to perhaps a science classroom and looking at about how that plays out. So I know that you have been sharing throughout the few weeks we've been in class so far about your research topics, your research interests. And so take a moment to think about, where do they come from? Do they come from your everyday life, your personal experiences, your professional experiences, or maybe a practical issue? And think about how those experiences have inspired your research ideas that you might want to take on for a topic. So once you start taking your topic, you want to narrow it down to get to your problem, purpose, and question. So this funnel, I think, is really helpful in helping you see that, because starting off with a broad research topic, there's many research questions that could come out of the same topic. So a research topic is generally 2 to 4 words, what you're interested in, integrating technology into math class. Maybe it's something like stress and anxiety and academic performance. Maybe you're interested in something on student athletes and retention in the program. So looking at some topics like that could lead to a lot. So you start off broad with your research topic, a couple words, and then you can go into the problem to locate it within a specific context. And then from there, talking about your purpose. And that's one really important thing I want you to get out of chapter 4, is being able to align your research purpose with the methodology that you choose. So the purpose, what your goal or objective is in that particular study, taking that and formulating research questions, and then depending on the approach, if it is quantitative or mixed methods, you will also have a hypothesis. So start thinking about this funnel, how you can throw in your research topic and how that might come out in different ways. Again, the researcher is the main one driving their research. So 2 different researchers could have the same research topic and come up with different questions because they are interested in a different aspect of the same topic. So that's likely something we will see over the course of this semester. I kind of looked at what everyone's interested in, and there are some overlaps. However, everyone's will take it up a little bit differently. So as you are thinking about your research topic, it is also important to begin collecting a review of the literature, the relevant literature. So this will provide what we refer to as the intellectual context of your study, situating it within what other researchers and scholars have already studied about the topic. So it is foundational for your research. So this goes in your introduction, in the beginning part part of your study. Before you even propose what exactly you will do, you talk about some relevant studies. In this class, we are looking between 3, 4, or 5 relevant studies that you can read. So look in this chapter to see how you can start to begin collecting those sources. It can also help you guide your research questions by looking at the research questions others have done to help you refine and focus and tailor and avoid duplication. If someone has already done that, how can you do it perhaps in a different context with a slightly different setting? It's okay if it's similar. However, every research study needs to have a unique angle that it's taking on. So doing a review of the literature can be really helpful for that. So I wanted to show you this flowchart. So when you are doing your literature review, it's going to vary across research paradigm. And when we talk about research paradigm, we're talking about quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods, the overall approach that you are taking to your research design. So if you are doing, and the main thing that is different about it is the timing, although there's of course many different variations within there. So if you are doing quantitative research, typically it is done before, because we know that quantitative research is deductive top down. So you will go to the literature to help you formulate your hypothesis. And then qualitative studies, it's done throughout. So in the beginning to help you theorize, lay that foundation, then it can also help you in the analysis and interpretation stage as you go to the literature to help you make sense of it. So I can't remember if I put this on the next slide, but I'll come back if I did. So in quantitative research, again, you are trying to do a survey to see how other researchers have taken it on, to help you formulate your specific hypothesis. And then qualitative is going to come throughout to identify some of the main themes that you are finding. And then mixed methods, you are going to be doing both. Okay, so I also want to talk about in the chapter, they talk about sources of information where you can find information for your literature review. So of course, books, journals, and then the internet. So in this course, when we do our literature review, we're going to be relying on empirical peer-reviewed studies that are scholarly articles. So you might use the internet to help you start to think about a research topic, but as far as the articles that you pull from, they do need to be from the databases. So in the chapter, they talk about the databases and how to use those. So oftentimes when you are looking for those empirical peer-reviewed articles, you might go to Google Scholar, and that is okay. Now, I do want you to know all of those articles that you find mostly are available through the fees that you pay as a student to Georgia State. And so you can access that through the databases. So when you want to access those peer-reviewed empirical articles, you can go to the Georgia State webpage. So the shortcut to go is lib.gsu.edu. And once you are there, you can search for databases by subject. Of course, we're doing education, and then you can just choose ERIC. And then when you sign in with your GSU credentials, your Panther ID and password, you have access to so many different journals and peer review articles that you can get to. So if you are looking for an article and you are looking for full text, remember you can get it through Georgia State. So I will just take you over to take a look at what that looks like. So here I am on the library website at Georgia State. So you can search here for keywords or topics. Here's where the database by subject is. Here is education, and it will take you to the databases. So any of these are okay. The text talks about ERIC, so that is here. You will sign in with your Georgia State credentials. You might have to do Duo to get signed in. Once you are here, you are at EBSCO. And so you might talk about like stress and academic performance. So when you go here, you can make that capital, then search. And so once you get here, you can have peer reviewed. And then as you see here, you can start to look for different topics that might be of interest. So as you can see, this is pretty broad, so I might want to add in a specific subject. Oh, and this is a typo too. Okay, so here you can see here's one about ninth grade students. This one is about teachers. And so once you get here, if you find an article that is relevant to your study, you can go here. You can, of course, find the full text, and you can also find a citation. We're using APA citation, so that is over here, and then you copy and paste your citation. So one of the perhaps, I think, most challenging things to do when you are doing your literature review is identifying your keywords. So I suggest once you have your research topic and your question, you jot down a list of keywords, think of synonyms for those, and then you can search based on those to help you find some articles that will be relevant to your study. So that's something to be thinking about after you identify your research topic is what are some keywords that you can use when you go to the ERIC database to find some relevant articles. And let me know if you want more information. I do have a few other lectures I can share with you about how to search for articles and write a literature review. So we looked at the funnel for choosing a research topic. Another thing to consider is it feasible? So of course, in this class, we are not conducting the research. Instead, we're doing a research proposal. However, this is something important to think about is the feasibility of your study in terms of the scope, how big it will be, how long it will take, and then particularly ethical concerns, which will be the topic of our next lecture. Now, once you have identified your research topic, you can start moving on to the research problem or issue and the purpose. So we looked at this funnel starting broad with the topic and then the research problem, which is more so contextualize where is this problem happening and then what your specific purpose is in there. So this is going to look different based on the purpose of your study is important because it will lead to a different research paradigm. So if you are interested for your research problem to understand the relationship between variables, that is going to be a quantitative problem, a problem that is best answered using a quantitative design. If you're more so interested in understanding or exploring a process or phenomenon, that is going to be best answered with a qualitative approach. So for instance, for a quantitative problem, it might be to examine the relationship between classroom size and performance. And then a qualitative problem might be investigating teachers' experiences implementing project-based learning. And then mixed methods combines both the numerical and the descriptive data, technology on both student outcomes like student achievement data, and then teacher attitudes. So the research problem will shape what design that you do. So that's really important to think about at this stage as well. So when we're thinking about research purposes, so one research purpose or some research purposes are to predict, explain, or describe the relationship between two or more variables. And so that is, again, best answered with a quantitative approach. So comparing test scores between students in different schools to help explain what might be happening to cause that, maybe to predict what the scores will be or describe what's happening. And then a qualitative purpose would be to explore or understand, and then mixed methods would be to integrate both of those approaches to find new insights or additional insights. So in chapter 4, there are some scripts for how to write. Am I getting ahead of myself? Mm. Okay, so I might come back to this in a few slides, but in the text, they do have more examples of research purposes and all of that. So that's really important to start thinking about your topic, your research purpose. So if you are doing a quantitative study, it's important to understand the role of variables in research. Now, variables are in quantitative research, not qualitative research. So that's an important distinction to remember. If you're proposing a qualitative study, you won't have a control group or any of these variables. But if you are interested in a research problem that is looking at the relationship between two variables, these are some of the vocabulary that you will need to know. So independent variable is the variable that you are trying to understand the impact of, and the dependent variable is what you are how you're going to measure it based on the outcome. So the independent variable might be like the teaching method that you are doing, a traditional method versus flipped, and then the dependent variable would be your test scores. And then in quantitative research, you will want to control those variables to make sure that you are isolating the independent variable and there are no extraneous variables. Now, if you are proposing a quantitative study, your research question should include phrasing that includes the independent variable and the dependent variable. So let's talk about research questions. So we've done your topic, your problem, your purpose, maybe describe, explore, predict. And so now we need to take that and form a question. And so oftentimes your question will restate your research purpose. So you can come back to whatever your purpose is here and then flip that and make it into a question. So a quantitative research question is phrased to understand the relationship between two or more variables. So here I underlined those variables. How does parental involvement influence student achievement? You can understand the relationship between those. A qualitative question, if you look back at the purpose of qualitative, is to explore or understand a phenomenon. So it might be to explore lived experiences or context. So for instance, what are students' perceptions of STEM careers? We saw an example also when we did the search, what are teachers' perceptions of? And then mixed methods integrates those quantitative and qualitative approaches. Now, if you are doing if you have a quantitative research question, you need to have a hypothesis also for your quantitative portion of your mixed methods. So if you're doing mixed methods, oftentimes you'll have a quantitative question, a qualitative question, and an interaction question. So your hypothesis is your prediction on what the relationship between those variables will be. Again, you don't have variables for a qualitative study. This is for quantitative. So as you start to write your research questions in the text, there are lots of examples and scripts. This is table 4.6, and it has some scripts for writing quantitative questions. So here you can see based on the different purpose, describe, predict, causal, which is similar to prediction, but you could measure with experimental data. So you can look at some of these. You can see the relationship between some scripts like that. Okay. So to close out chapter 4, so you will be doing a literature review about your research topic. So you can start exploring the Georgia State database to look at that. And you can also start to think about how you might use literature in your practice outside of your research proposal. And there are some great tips in the chapter about how to evaluate the quality of a source, thinking about where it came from, its different perspectives, and to make sure that it's reliable there, make sure that it's not over-claiming to prove or using overly emotional language to try to convince or create. And then two things to note are looking at a meta-analysis or a meta-synthesis to look at the overall results where the researcher has already analyzed multiple studies for you. Okay, so on to chapter 5. Chapter 5 is all about how to structure a research proposal. So this is laying the foundation for all the future chapters in the book, because all of the future chapters go in depth about the different components of this research proposal. So we'll start by going an overview, knowing that you are going to be learning more and learn how to accurately write each portion. So it starts off with your research topic and your research questions. Then you have your summary of prior research, those 3 to 5 articles. And then you have your detailed methods and procedures that you will do to collect data to help you answer those research questions. So here is the research template that we are going to be using. This is available in iCollege. You have, of course, your title page. So here is the introduction, your method, and then data analysis, those same sections talked about there. So in here, I have the headings that you can use. You can just make a copy of this and change it out with your own topic. So here you have your introduction talking about the research issue. This in the text is what they refer to as the research problem. Here's where you will include your summary of prior literature. Here you have your research questions, the purpose of your study, we talked about that, and then the research significance or hypothesis. So if you're doing quantitative, you'll have your hypothesis. Qualitative, you talk about the potential outcomes. Mixed methods, you'll talk about both. Then you have your method, talk about, are you proposing a quantitative study, qualitative study, or mixed methods, and why it's appropriate. Again, thinking back to making sure that it matches your questions and your purpose. The research design, what specifically you will do to carry it out, the setting, where you propose it will take place, participants, instruments, data sources, your procedures, and then data analysis, and then closing out with your references. Now, this is what you will turn in at the very end of the semester, but I wanted to show you this so you can start building it now. We are going to have a check-in where you are going to turn in your proposal outline. And so that is when you will go over fill in the areas that are highlighted, your issue, your questions, and the method, and your 3 to 5 references. So that's why those are highlighted. So you can look at that in iCollege if you want to get started and make a copy as you start to think about your research topic and proposal. So the purpose of your introduction is to define the research topic, the significance, why it's important that you do it, talk about your research objectives, which is the purpose of your study, and then also your research questions. The variable, if you're doing quantitative, you have to include your variables and your hypothesis. And then the methods, you will talk about your participants, design, instruments, and procedures. So in these chapters, chapter 4, we talked a lot about these items in the introduction, and the rest of the book will go into detail about the method section and the analysis section. So as you start to think about crafting your own research proposal, you can think about some of these items that you might want to include in your study. And the data analysis section, once we get there, will again be different if it's quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods, and we will be covering those in detail in later chapters. The abstract is what goes before your research paper or proposal, and it summarizes the overall goals and methods of the study. So this is something when you are reviewing literature, you can also look at their abstract to get an idea of what the study is going to be about and if it is relevant to you. Then the references go at the end. They'll be in APA format. So I showed you how you can use the database to help you cite. There's also an option in Google Scholar where if you, underneath the article, you can click cite and copy and paste the APA citation. So it's already formatted for you. So as you start to craft your research proposal, thinking about your topic, your purpose, and your question, make sure that you are, of course, making sure that it is keeping in mind ethical standards and how you will treat participants, if it's feasible, and that you have all of the components. So thinking about, are your research questions aligned with your methods, and then are the instruments valid? So overall, as we are thinking about both of these chapters, the literature review process can both be helpful for your research proposal and then also in your practice to help you see what other scholars and researchers have found out about your topic. You can start to plan, make sure that it's going to be feasible and aligned, talked about that. And you can also use your prior research to help you contextualize your study, how your study fits in with it. So as you close out these chapters, you can start to think about your potential research topic, purpose, and question. So here is the proposal exercise from the text. So as you start to think about your research proposal, start with, again, your funnel, your topic area. The specific problem within that area is your method of study, whether it be quantitative, qualitative, or mixed methods, your research question, and then if it is quantitative, your variables and your hypothesis. And then you can also start to conduct your literature review, looking for articles that will help you understand the issue in context. So make sure that, again, you continue to come back to this because these questions will be the first thing that you will turn in for your proposal outline.